Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Channy True Crimes. Today, we re-diving deep into a chapter of Brazilian history that is as tragic as it is essential to understand. The Carandiru Massacre. Grab a seat, because this is a story that still echoes decades later. Imagine this. It's a Friday afternoon, October 2nd, 1992. The clock is ticking past 4:20 p.m. The São Paulo detention house, known to literally everyone as Carandiru, is about to become the stage for one of the most horrific tragedies in the entire history of the Brazilian prison system. What started as a seemingly common fight between two inmates, a dispute we've heard countless times, would spiral out of control and end just a few hours later with 111 prisoners dead. And get this, not a single police officer injured. This wasn't just an incident, it was a massacre that would stain Brazil's history and resonate for decades to come. So, let's go back a bit. What was Carandiru exactly? This massive concrete structure was born on April 21st, 1920, envisioned as a model prison. Think about that, a model prison. It was supposed to be a benchmark for correctional facilities, but, as often happens, time and severe neglect completely transformed that initial vision into something absolutely dystopian. Nestled in the north zone of São Paulo, this penitentiary complex, which was originally designed to comfortably house hundreds, ended up literally swallowing thousands upon thousands of people. On that fateful day of the tragedy, Pavilion 9 alone, a section primarily designated for first-time offenders and provisional prisoners, men who hadn't even been tried yet, crammed more than 2,000 human beings into conditions that defied every single notion of human dignity you can imagine. Overcrowding wasn't just a number on a statistics sheet. It was a suffocating, unbearable reality. It was the stench, the perpetual lack of light, the cramped, suffocating corridors. It was cells shared by dozens of men, constant daily violence, rampant diseases, food that was barely edible, and perhaps most devastatingly, the absolute absence of hope. Carandiru wasn't just a prison. It was a powder keg, waiting for the smallest spark to ignite. And on that October afternoon, that spark tragically appeared. It all began with two men, Barba and Coelho, Antonio Luiz Nascimento and Luiz Tavares de Azevedo. These were two figures from the prison underworld, and they had a disagreement. According to witnesses, it was over drug debts and territorial disputes between rival factions. Sounds like a routine fight in that hyper-tense, volatile universe, right? Guards eventually entered the pavilion to separate them and ordered everyone back to their cells, earlier than the usual time. For a moment, it seemed like the situation was under control, but inside that human cauldron where frustration, rage, and despair had been boiling for years, this seemingly small episode acted as a massive trigger. The prisoners, instead of retreating, joined forces. They improvised barricades using whatever they could find, furniture, mattresses, anything that wasn't bolted down. They set materials on fire, and smoke began to billow. Screams echoed through the narrow concrete corridors. What started as a minor scuffle quickly escalated into a full-blown riot. Pavilion 9 was in rebellion. For many of those men who were just awaiting trial, who didn't know if they'd ever get a lawyer, who had no idea when, or if they would ever get out of there. That moment represented far more than just a revolt against a fight or against the guards. It was the explosion of years and years of abandonment, of complete invisibility, of being treated as something less than human. It was a scream into the void. Faced with this rapid escalation of the conflict, the São Paulo Military Police Command activated the shock troops. Colonel Ubiratan Guimarães took command of the operation, given the green light by the then Secretary of Public Security, Pedro Franco de Campos. The decision was made, and it was a chilling one. Enter with full force. About 341 police officers advanced on Pavilion 9. They were armed with rifles, submachine guns, gas bombs, and accompanied by attack dogs. They penetrated the narrow, dark corridors of the penitentiary. What happened in the following minutes has been described by experts and survivors alike as nothing short of a mass execution. Can you believe this? It's estimated that at least 3,500 shots were fired in approximately 20 minutes. 20 minutes of absolute, unadulterated terror. The prisoners, in a desperate attempt, ran to their cells, hoping to protect themselves, to find some shred of safety. But the bullets found them there. Experts later found machine gun marks on the walls. Clear signs that 90% of the shots were fired directly into the cells, meaning they were aimed at men who were no longer confronting anyone, men who were trying to hide men who were literally begging for their lives. Witnesses from that day recount scenes of utter panic, the deafening continuous noise of gunfire, the chilling sound of helicopters thudding overhead, the aggressive barking of dogs, desperate agonizing screams, the acrid smell of gunpowder mixed horribly with the smell of blood, and then, abruptly, silence. The heavy, suffocating silence of death. When the smoke finally cleared and the bodies were grimly counted, the official number marked 111 dead inmates. And here's a crucial detail. Of these, 84 were provisional prisoners. These were men who hadn't even been tried, who were still awaiting the justice's decision, who could have potentially been acquitted and walked free. And, remarkably, 0 police officers died. 0 police officers were even injured. This stark imbalance tells its own story. However, the number 111 is contested to this very day. Survivors and other witnesses claim that the true total number of dead may have been significantly higher, possibly even double that official count. There are whispers of bodies that disappeared, identifications that were never made, and families who, to this day, have never received real answers. The Carandiru massacre wasn't just the largest slaughter in a Brazilian prison. It became a chilling symbol of the state's profound failure, of unchecked police brutality, and of an absolute dehumanizing contempt for the lives of those whom society had already in its harsh judgment relegated to oblivion. The consequences of this horrific massacre reverberated not only throughout Brazil, but also far beyond its borders. The Inter-American Commission on Human Rights swiftly denounced the Brazilian state. International human rights organizations classified the episode as a crime against humanity. This international pressure intensified scrutiny on the Brazilian prison system, exposing its deep-seated issues like chronic overcrowding, institutional violence, and widespread structural neglect. In 2002, a decade after the massacre, the detention house was finally deactivated. Its imposing pavilions were demolished, and in the very place where so much blood was spilled, the youth park was built, a symbolic, hopeful attempt to transform death into life and terror into a new hope. But the indelible marks of Carandiru weren't simply erased with the demolition of its walls. In a paradoxical and deeply cruel way, the massacre contributed directly to the reorganization of crime in São Paulo. It was in the very cauldron of Carandiru that the First Capital Command, PCC, was born and strengthened, eventually becoming one of the most powerful criminal factions in the entire country. Culturally, the tragedy was etched into memory through powerful works like the books Carandiru Station by Dr. Drauzio Varela, who worked within the prison's walls and witnessed that universe up close. Films, documentaries, and songs have since kept this memory alive, or at least tried desperately to prevent it from being forgotten. More than 3 decades later, the Carandiru massacre continues to be an open, bleeding wound in Brazilian history. It forces us to ask deeply uncomfortable questions. How did we get there? Why did a seemingly simple fight between 2 prisoners result in 111 deaths? Who gave the order to shoot? Why were so many killed inside their very cells, where they sought refuge? And perhaps the most uncomfortable question of all, what has truly changed since then? Sadly, overcrowding continues in Brazilian prisons. Violence within these institutions persists. The invisibility and dehumanization of prisoners remain. Rebellions continue to break out, and the heartbreaking feeling that those 111 men, and so many others, both before and after them, died in vain, that feeling also continues to linger. This story didn't end in 1992. It continues to be alive, raw, and bleeding. Thank you so much for watching and for taking the time to learn about this critical piece of history. If you found this video insightful, please give it a thumbs up, share it with others, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you do not miss out on more deep dives into complex topics. Your support helps us bring these important stories to light. We'll see you in the next one.